Art Speak interns on Seeing Gender. How does the media contribute to your perception of gender?
Ever since you come into this world, you're constantly bombarded with images and different influences of what gender should be or how you should act. And I think obviously like we're all socialized different ways, but there are certainly broad societal ideas about gender that have really created lots of problems, but also created lots of points for empowerment. And I think in right now, a lot of things are a process of unlearning like how media has contributed and potentially trying to usher in new media that can contribute differently and maybe help us like think about gender differently.
From a young age, we're usually taught that there are only two genders, like a boy and a girl. And I think that once I saw more and more of how people chose to represent themselves through like social media, I kind of understood that it was more than just two things. And it was about like what you feel about yourself inside than what you are born with.
The media that we all consume, like from the time that we're children, kind of gives us a playbook on how to act in accordance with our assigned gender in a way that kind of tells me and other people in general that like if you don't do this, you are doing something wrong. And I think it also just perpetuates a lot of harmful stereotypes about people of specific genders also.
In terms of social media, I feel like there's such a strong like pressure on women to have like this very curated life, and especially for like Asian women, I feel like there's so many like stereotypes that you see in movies and film, like all these different archetypes, like being like this like sexy like dragon lady, or like the idea of like a very weak and like shallow like Madame Butterfly like a type person, porcelain doll type person. And I feel like especially for young girls, there's such a like it's so hard when you see like this is how your gender is like portrayed online, how are you supposed to navigate between like these two very big like different extremes, like of like are you supposed to act sexy and like strong, or are you supposed to act like weak and like submissive to other people? And even though these two things are like very like two-dimensional like things, but like how do you portray yourself to fit within like these two guidelines?
I see media as pretty binary when it comes to gender, and when it isn't, in my experience, when they approach things like androgyny, it seems like they're usually pretty fetishized or romanticized, when really androgyny is just a valid form of gender presentation for a lot of people, but it seems to be something like that's used to be marketable and something new, almost like the way that I think mixed race individuals are also presented in the media sometimes.
I think all media portrayal of gender is like, for the most part, really harmful and unhelpful, because I think most of it is just a reflection of stereotypes. And frankly, I think for the most part, trans representation is essentially the same thing, where, for the most part, trans representation that we see in the media is not created for trans people. And I think trans people know this, that it's mostly just created as this representation of a perfect trans person, right? Because trans people are still considered as very new. It's more about projecting a political message than it is creating a good character. And I think for a long time that definitely contributed to my perception of my transness, in the sense that I thought a lot about being the perfect trans person and being the right trans person and being palatable to cis people. And I think that was really harmful.
Now I think there's kind of a shift going on, and you start to see more like non-binary or gender non-conforming characters in movies and TV shows and advertisements. And that is kind of an interesting situation, because on the one hand, there's so much validation of the people that feel they don't fit into
the like binary categories that we've really been handed for the majority of our lives. And so to see themselves represented on screen is such an important thing. But at the same time, kind of similar to like liberal multiculturalism, we cannot allow corporations and Hollywood and just like the general media to ignore the root of the problem and only put a band-aid over the bullet hole of representation and equity by, you know, showing these characters on screen and then for an advertisement, you know, encouraging people to buy from this company because they support the queer community. For a TV show, encouraging people to watch this TV show because they represent the queer community. Like, ultimately, representation is not going to be the thing that solves these inequalities for genderqueer people.
The media that's had the most positive influence on how I perceive my own gender has been media that doesn't just reflect the worst parts of sexism or the worst parts of the way we view ourselves in a binary way. And oftentimes that is material that has been written by women or non-binary people and is aiming for something that looks beyond gender.
Learn more about the ArtSpeak internship at about.asianart.org/art-speak and on Instagram at ArtSpeakInterns. Credits: ArtSpeak interns and interviewees: Ollie Axelrod, Athena Chang, Ida Handwerker, Caden Honda, Athene Lejeunesse, Mindy Luo, Sophia Shen, Zora Ueda Hale, Sophia Valdez, Isha Venkatesh. Interviewer: Triana Patel. Editor: Lorraine Goodwin. Advisors: Maya Hara, Joanna Lee, Megan Merritt, Allison Wyckoff. Copyright 2021 Asian Art Museum. www.asianart.org